Hi, and welcome to The Seeker
and The Skeptic.
I'm Kat, and I'm the flaky, unpredictable, maybe a bit irrational Seeker.
And I'm Rebecca. I'll be your sarcastic, grumpy, close-minded, skeptical host. Or maybe we should just be ourselves.
Sounds good to me. This podcast is going to dive deep into the controversial topics that some may call New Age, or woo-woo, or just plain foolish.
And hopefully look at them with a skeptical but open-minded approach that will encourage understanding and acceptance from both the skeptics
and the seekers. Happy Halloween!
Happy Samhain!
What?
Samhain! It's a traditional Wiccan festival. Well, as traditional as anything in Wicca gets. You can listen to our episode on Wicca if you want to find out more about that. It actually means summer's end, I think. But it's more like winter's beginning, right? This time of year? Than summer's end?
Yeah, I feel like it is that kind of like weird between worlds time, which I guess is another way of saying Halloween.
That's
or Samhain.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's what they think of it as. It's thought to be like a liminal time when the veil between the living and the dead is really thin. And it's originally a Gaelic festival, although the traditions that Wiccans celebrate on the day aren't a continuation of the traditional Gaelic festival because they've all been lost. Well, no, I don't know. Originally, we think that it was celebrated in Neolithic times because there's these Neolithic sites where when the sun comes up, it shines through just the right point on sunrise on Samhain. So we think something was going on in the Neolithic. Then there's Gaelic traditions, and then there's this like Wiccan reconstruction thing where Wiccans generally like honour the ancestors and celebrate the new year. If it's the new year, it's the start of the pagan new year. If you listeners haven't listened to our episodes on Wicca, you might be surprised to hear that your skeptic used to be a witch. Anyway, but yeah. So also Wiccans indulge in, general spookiness. It's not just all the ancestor worship.
That's it's I think good fun and enjoyed the world over, which I'm always happy to take part, carve a pumpkin. So on this spooky minisode, we're going to be answering the question directly from the spirit world. Have you ever seen a ghost?
So this question, obviously, was written in ectoplasm on our walls last night. But if you have a question you'd like us to answer, you can contact us via Twitter @SeekerSkeptic or email us at hello@seekerskeptic.com. Sorry, hello@seekerandskeptic.com.
That's right. Why not put that and in? Don't forget that. Or you can just say the name of the podcast 3 times in the mirror on Halloween night.
No, that's just for the Patreon supporters. We only appear if you pledge $1 or more a month.
Oh, yes. And please, I would love you to consider supporting our show at patreon.com/seekerskeptic. We do love our patrons.
Yes, we love both of you.
So, Rebecca, have you ever seen a ghost?
Well, this is not really seeing a ghost, but my first sort of experience with potential ghostly activity was as a kid. Me and my brother would stay at my grandma's house, and we had 2 bedrooms and the wall with a connecting wall, so the heads of our beds were both against this wall. We had these long, dangly, I don't know what you call them, light pulls? Like a light switch that dangles down on a bit of string?
Sure, yeah.
What would you call that? Is that a light pull?
Like a light switch cord.
Light switch cord? Anyway.
But I liked yours, it was shorter.
We had these things, and I used to hold it away from the wall and let it bang back against the wall to make a tapping sound. And then I would listen, and I'd hear the tapping come back. And I was pretty sure it was just my brother doing the same thing on the other side of the wall. But I wasn't 100% sure, and in case it was, I wanted him to think that my tapping was coming from a ghost, so I couldn't ask him about it. So both of us sort of half believed that there was something spooky going on, and we just, because you know how brothers and sisters are, it's my younger brother, so of course I have one over on him, so we just held out, both of us, until he eventually got so scared he had to say, "Is it you doing the tapping?" And then I was like, no, it was a ghost.
And to this day, he still believes.
Yeah, to this day, he can't go near a light pole.
That's good. That's quite good. So
it's kind of
you
similar to the
basically
Fox sisters story as well, isn't it? Like that. We talked about this in our mediumship episode. They started communicating with what was his name, Old Scratch or something, with a creepy
Right.
devil-like character through these mysterious crackings and tappings and rappings. And it was later found out that they were doing it themselves through clicking their toes. But I wonder whether there was an element of them playing with each other and, you know, spooking each other out.
That's how it started. Yeah, yeah. So my first, and I thought my only ghost story up until very recently happened on, I think it was November 1st. That's the day.
Ooh, spooky date.
All Souls Day, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it was then. But yeah, anyway. I lay in bed at night. I was kind of like, I'd already gone to sleep, but I started to wake up. Couldn't move my body. I could see in my room, and it felt like somebody. I was actually lying on my side, which is weird because normally scary things happen to me if I'm lying on my back. But you know, if you have a scary dream, I usually wake up and I'm on my back. And yeah, I was kind of on my side, and it felt like something was behind me in the bed. And even though I felt like I could see the room, it felt just more like a dark presence, a kind of shadowy figure, like out of the corner of my eye. It also, at the time, I felt like it was saying something, like, you know, like a whispery thing.
Cat.
Basically, yeah. It was terrifying. It felt like it lasted forever. I couldn't move my body, couldn't do anything about it until, like, you know, something, I somehow shook whatever it was off and I could move again. And I could, like, it seemed to be gone.
Those sort of encounters are really creepy. This feels like a bit of a teaser for our sleep paralysis episode.
It does. And basically, I went downstairs, told my dad. He did not comfort me. He just told me that he told me some of his own ghost stories. So I didn't go back to bed that night feeling particularly relieved until I spoke to my sister the next day, who did tell me about sleep paralysis, told me about the old hag, which sounded very similar to what I'd experienced. And yeah, that was the first of many sleep paralysis experiences, each more terrifying than the last. Actually, the last one I had wasn't so terrifying. That was just Hatman.
No, just Hatman.
Just Hatman. Yeah.
Does it still creep you out? Like, telling that story, do you still get a bit sort of spooked?
I'm just relieved to know what it really is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to believe. This is one of those beliefs that I don't want to have. I don't want to believe that that was real, because that was horrible. And one thing I do know is that those sleep paralysis things have only happened when I'm very stressed. So I actually have a good incentive now to, like, get good sleep and, like, chill the F out to avoid the old hag returning.
I really think this just general sort of how stressed you are, what your life circumstances are, play in a lot into these sort of ghostly or paranormal experiences. At least they have done for me, because probably the scariest experience I had that was kind of ghost-like was when I was at university and I was super stressed out and smoking a bit too much weed and just generally not getting enough sleep, not in a good place psychologically. And we were living in this really grungy little flat, me and two guys. And there was, it was like in a big block of flats, and we didn't really know the people who lived around, but it was a general feeling of it not being a very, you know, salubrious area. And there was a woman who lived below us who was very, very skinny. And we sort of assumed that she had some kind of drug problem, although that was just an assumption. But she looked like maybe she did. And
the assumptions of, like, students. This is
I know.
very difficult.
I mean, I don't know what on earth she thought about us, because we were obviously a mess as well. But so she used to come up to our flat and ask to borrow Rizla, which is, I don't know if they have them in the US. That's like rolling papers for rolling cigarettes or spliffs. And she used to come up and ask to borrow them, or, well, to have them when she ran out. And because she was such an unsettling presence, she was just very intense, and you sort of always felt like maybe she was going to lunge through the door when you opened the door to her. It was just, she was unpredictable. So if I was there on my own, I wouldn't open the door to her. So I heard a knock at the door one evening, and it was wintertime, so it was dark, and I went to look out the little spy hole to see who it was, and I saw her there, and I can't remember if I was stoned, but to be honest, that time in my life I probably was. And I looked at her through that tiny little distorted spy hole, the little round spy hole, and she was there, and she looked just as scary as usual, just as intimidating as usual. But something kind of like, because it was slightly dark and I was in a, a weird frame of mind, something sort of twisted in my perception. And I saw, maybe she was moving around a bit weirdly as well, because it looked like she had extra arms, like moving in a really jerky, unnerving way. I was also watching a lot of horror movies at this time. And then I keep on looking, and it's that scenario where you're like pressed up against a spy hole, but I don't want her to hear me breathing on the other side of the door. So I'm trying to keep as quiet as possible. And it's dark because I didn't turn the light on. When I went to do the door, I didn't turn the light on because I didn't want the light to shine under the door to let her know that I was there. So I'm in the dark, pressed up against the sky hole. She's in the dark outside, well, in the dimly lit hallway anyway. And there's this weird thing where it looks like she has multiple arms. And I look closer, and I swear, this sounds so bizarre, but this is what I saw. It looked like she had a swastika carved on her forehead. Like, what's his name? Charles Manson?
So scary.
Oh my God, it was so scary. So I just backed away from the door and got into bed and hid there until my housemates came home.
Oh God, you were on your own as well.
Yeah, I was
nasty.
so scared. And so and all the time through my head, I'm going, this is irrational, this is crazy. I'm having all those thoughts, but it was so intense. The experience was so intense that my rational mind was kind of, and I don't know whether listeners know, but I used to not be a skeptic. So this is before I saw the light of reason and found skepticism. So I just and I think I've talked previously about, the idea that there are some people who are more prone to what people like Michael Shermer would call patternicity, or making connections and sort of, and there's a certain sort of personality which is more prone to, they're often artists or poets or storytellers putting things together in this way. So I'm freaked out. My housemate comes home and we have this kind of relationship, and we still do. Hi AJ, if you're listening, where we tell stories to each other all the time and elaborate on each other's stories and create little fictions between us. It's one of the fun sort of verbal games we play. So I tell him about this, and then a couple of nights later he says to me, that creature you saw? And I'm like, yeah, the spider Nazi. Because by now I've given her this terrifying name because she had multiple arms and the swastika. Must be a spider Nazi. He says, yeah, the spider Nazi, you know her? What she does sometimes is she will climb up onto the ceiling of the bathroom and press herself back up against the ceiling of the bathroom. And then she'll dangle one leg down, and instead, when you reach for the light pull, or whatever it's called, when you go into the bathroom in the night, you'll pull her leg and she'll jump down on you. Oh! So I was pissing in the dark for the rest of my university career. It's not going to pull that leg.
So I think that is karma from your light pulling teasing.
Yeah, maybe.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it was really. I mean, I think this is kind of, I was definitely in a place in my life where, things were a bit wonky in the old brain box. So, I mean, the spookiest thing of all is mental illness, right? So once this idea was planted, obviously every dark shape I saw in the corner or slightly odd looking person on the bus, in my mind, it would be somehow connected. And it wasn't until a while later when I was researching something for university and I happened on a picture of the goddess Kali. And I was like, oh, look, she's got multiple arms. And there's that swastika. And then I sort of somehow reconceptualized the spider Nazi as actually the goddess Kali, trying to communicate with me, which is an equally strange idea, but it was a much more comforting version of that idea and led me on an amazing adventure because I went to go visit Kali temples. After I finished university, I went to Nepal and to India and even to Bali. They have a sort of a different version of Kali there, Ranga. Anyway, so it became this interest in Hinduism and in the goddess Kali, which was actually quite interesting and fulfilling and happy. But that, yeah, I mean, and like I asked you before, if that remembering the sleep paralysis incident still spooks you out, I was so hesitant to speak about this on the podcast because one, it makes me sound crazy, but then I was like, well, we need to destigmatize mental illness anyway, so that's okay. And two, because it still makes me a bit, I don't know, it makes me feel weird.
Sure, because you can relive it. You can relive it, and maybe, I don't know about you, but my thing is oh, but what if that wasn't sleep paralysis? What if there's something more to the story? What I like about that is that, you know, we talk about this on every episode, like what are the dangers, what are the harms of these things that we're talking about? And I think that's a great illustration of like what your world can look like if you are too caught up in some of these beliefs. It's not always fun, like, oh, I might see this thing or this thing. I'd love to see a fairy. It's like, no, what if I see Spider Nazi?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
and if we kind of
and
like brush things off and say, oh, well, people, you know, people are having fun with it, what's the harm? Then that's fine whilst they are having fun. But if you start believing in spirits, then why do you only see the good ones?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. I think like if I'd had a skeptical friend at the time who'd been able to talk me through this and maybe get me into therapy a bit sooner than I ended up going, I would have been much better off.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you found Carly though. That's pretty cool. And you have don't you have like a big Carly tattoo or something?
I do have a massive Carly tattoo from that time. Yeah, my whole back's covered with Carly. So yeah, I mean, and that's a fascinating like thing to delve into and interesting sort of, I mean, I'll use your language, okay? Archetype to think about the dark feminine and all that stuff. But again, like, it makes me feel self-conscious to talk about it because I'm not living up to my skeptic cred. But yeah.
I'm sure no one is judging. We have very lovely listeners. So how about hearing my next
Oh yeah,
story?
this happened recently, right?
Very recent, like 2 days ago. At the time of recording, anyway. So, I was doing my washing. I'm actually at the time I won't go into too much detail, but I'm basically at a spiritual place. I'm at a community. This will be the topic of another podcast episode. So I'm doing my washing. I put my washing in the washing machine. Close the door. Start the machine. Everything's filling up with water.
Wait a minute. Is it nighttime?
No, it's the day, morning.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, didn't set the scene. Just before breakfast, if you needed to know. And I look into my bag that held the washing and realised I'd left a sock ball, you know, when you put two socks together and a ball of sock. That's still there. And I curse bloody murder and quietly to myself, because again, it's a spiritual community. And I just throw the bag down and close the door and I, you know, go and have my breakfast. When I come back, I see that the bag's been moved. So I was like, where's the bag? Oh, I found the bag. And then, weirdly, I realised that there's no, the sock ball has gone from the bag.
Oh.
And when I took out the washing, everything had been washed, including the sock ball.
So you think, you just imagined the sock ball being there?
No, I think a ghost open, like a friendly ghost, like Casper, opened the washing machine, but without getting any water out, and put the sock ball in. I literally don't know how this happened.
So he maybe like pushed it through the glass, like with his ghostly hand.
It's like or it's like I mean, maybe it's a multi-dimensional washing machine, and on some dimension the socks were actually washed.
It was in a spiritual community's bathroom, so that makes sense that it would be a multi-dimensional washing. If there's going to be one anywhere, that's where it would be.
I think so too. Yeah, so I think all of my prayers and deity worship actually worked, and some good came of that washing machine incident, and I have lovely clean socks.
Wait a minute, do you have multiple pairs of these same socks?
Yeah, slightly different colours.
So could it have been that you looked in the bag, the socks were still there, and then the socks like fell out of the bag or were taken out of the bag, and then
I never found those socks.
Yeah, maybe by a ghost. I'm not saying it wasn't a ghost that took them.
True, that would actually be a ghost that has lesser abilities, because it's one thing to steal some socks, it's another thing to put them into a running washing machine.
Yes, exactly.
So,
and also a nefarious ghost, like instead of the friendly one that helps you out and puts them in, it's a mean ghost.
Yeah, trickster. Yeah, so that was my other ghost story.
Okay, I've got one more. And this starts with, as many ghost stories do, messing around with a Ouija board, which I did loads when I was a kid. In fact, I made my own Ouija board when I was a kid. I think this is how I was in my early 20s, but I'm just saying when I was a kid. Before I knew better to mess with the dark arts, made my own Ouija board. It was a round mirror. and I wrote all the letters around painted them on top around the edge, and then we had a shot glass, because what you need for a Ouija board is a smooth surface, so the glass has to move across, so a mirror is perfect, although it makes the most horrific screeching sound when the glass on glass if it goes too fast. But anyway, so again, it's nighttime, in a shared house with some friends, and we have this big window, like floor to ceiling window, and it's pitch black out there, but we know out there is a graveyard, and we're sitting in front with our Ouija board with our fingers on the upturned shot glass, and we, I can't remember what we said, is there anyone out there, does anyone want to contact us, something along those lines, and the glass starts moving. Have you ever done a Ouija board before?
Too scared.
Really? Oh, that would make such a good episode. I'll try and convince you. I'll grind you down. Anyway, so it's really weird the way when you start feeling, because it really does feel like it's moving independently. So it starts moving under our fingers, and it goes to B, and then now it's like getting a bit of momentum up, and it starts moving faster. It goes to A, and then it goes to T, and then it goes back to B, and it just keeps on making this triangle between those three letters. And we're like, bat? What does that mean? And then it started going to places on the board which didn't have any letters, in a shape, in a geometric shape. And it became really clear, especially to us, because I was Wiccan and other people there were Wiccan, that was making a pentagram just again and again. And we're like, because we're Wiccan, we're like, oh, well, this is a good spirit, clearly. Otherwise, why would they be giving us the wonderful symbol of earth, air, fire, water, spirit that is the pentagram? This must be a friendly spirit. If a non-Wiccan had that encounter, they might be, Satan. But yeah, we were feeling good about it. So we decided that this was a spirit. We didn't necessarily think it was a ghost, maybe a poltergeist, called Bat, or that was at least the name it had given us to communicate. And then from then on, every time something went wrong, every time something like that sock story happened to us, we just went, oh, Bat, what are you up to? And because of this big mirror, the big window that acted like a mirror when it was dark outside, and we were too cheap to buy curtains, or too poor to buy curtains, so it was just open all the time. Whenever you saw something move around in behind the window or any weird reflection, that just got attributed to Bat, up to his old tricks. Any strange noises, that was obviously Bat. And it just became, again, it's one of those stories that we told each other and we kept elaborating on. And I can't remember at what point I read about or heard about the idea of tulpas. Have you heard this word?
No.
So it's an idea, it's actually your friend Helena Blavatsky from Theosophy. Kat's a budding theosophist. Right?
Pretty much.
So she came up with it. She sort of appropriated this concept, sort of misunderstood it from Tibetan tradition, which and that's where the word tulpa comes from. But the way that she thought of it, which I don't think is accurate, is that lots of people, if they all think about the same thing and focus on the same thing, it sort of creates that thing in another realm or in a different thing. So you can make a ghost. If you all think about it and focus about it and talk about it enough and maybe chant and, meditate on the subject, you sort of create that ghost. And that's what we started to believe was going on with Bat, because we all believed and invested in him, we were making him real. And then I guess at some point we moved out that house and completely forgot about him. And I haven't really thought about him until today.
Oh, Bat. What I like about that is this is the positive end of the kind of weird belief spectrum, because that will explain in a positive way, like you said, to you guys all kind of mutually agreed, we think it's a good guy. And then that can explain when crappy things happen. Yeah. Obviously, this is like if we had a drinking game attached to this episode, it would be, when is Kat going to bring up astrology? And it just made me think of how we use Mercury retrograde to be like, well, my computer broke, that's Mercury. And I think as soon as we put a personality to these things, they can actually be a bit more easy to handle, because a lot of the time it's like humans, we just want to know why. If you're on a train that's delayed, you want the driver to come on and say, guys, we're sorry, this is what's happening. We actually don't, even if they don't know how long it's going to be, just for them to acknowledge it and maybe explain why there's a delay seems to really help us mentally kind of calm down.
Oh, for sure. I think it's a very human thing. But the explanation doesn't necessarily have to be true to satisfy us.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. We just need an explanation.
Yeah, which is why so many of these ideas, I think it's often why we fall into believing things that are kind of a nice, simple explanation. We talked about this a bit when we were talking about conspiracy theories in the David Icke episode. Like, it's nice to have a sort of narrative that puts everything together and makes sense of something that is actually because if you accept that strange things happen and you're never really going to get to the bottom of where those socks went or who moved that or, what that strange noise was, like, that's living in uncertainty, and humans aren't good with living in uncertainty.
Yeah. Hence a lot of what the subjects we talk about seem to be created from that quality of humans.
Oh, you're sounding like a skeptic now.
No, I think it's a beautiful thing. I think let's fill uncertainty with interesting ideas.
And I say no, live in the uncertainty. Anyway, we better get on with carving those pumpkins.
Yes. Hope you all have a spooky Samhain.
And a happy Halloween.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know with a tweet or an email. We'd really love to hear about your experiences.
Yes, please tell us what we got wrong. You can email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @seekerskeptic.
You'll find the show notes for this and every episode at seekerandskeptic.com.
And if you're interested, you can find my skeptically themed comics at rebeccaonpaper.com or follow me on Twitter @RebeccaOnPaper.
And I'm at yoga_astrology on Twitter. And you can find me exploring the intersection of yoga and astrology at yogaandastrology.com.
If you liked what you heard and fancy supporting the show and spreading the word, we'd really appreciate a rating and review in the Apple Podcast Store or wherever you're listening.
Or just tell somebody you know about the show. Thanks for listening.